Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Van Lanningham, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much, Glenn, for asking me to be here and in your persistence. Glenn's right. I think he asked me 4 years ago or so to first do this, and unfortunately, I'm still working. Normally, I'm working at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday, so we've been unable to touch base. But I'm glad to be here and glad to be with all of you on the new year and the new day here. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you had a safe and sound New Year's Eve, and it's a good way to start out the year is with a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I was thinking about it last night, and my last New Year's Eve before I sobered up, my sobriety date is March 16th, 1992, which means I'm 32 years sober. My last New Year's Eve, I passed out at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. is when I had passed out, and that's what I was bringing to the table. So I'm grateful that things aren't like that anymore. I did pass out at 4 p.m. again last night, but this was from fatigue, not alcohol. So I'm getting older. Um, I'm reminded when I think about New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and new beginnings, and everyone's on these kicks. Clancy had this great line where he talked about every night is New Year's Eve in Alcoholics Anonymous. They talk about New Year's Eve being amateur night. There's kind of a joke being made about regular drinkers going out and getting drunk and trying to drive, things we do all the time. But the truth of the matter is, I would argue that the real amateurish is the fact that they're making these resolutions that will probably fade away within a week or two. Whereas with us, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual condition, we're making resolutions nightly to become better versions of ourselves, to grow closer to God, to be more effective in our helpfulness and understanding of each other, and it's really a privilege to live this way. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be sober. To tell you a little bit about what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. Um, as far as me being, I wasn't raised in an alcoholic home. I had two parents who were pathetic examples of drinkers. My father was in the Vietnam War, and he got drunk over there one night and blacked out. And he woke up the next day so mortified that he couldn't remember uh, previous previous parts of the night, that he quit drinking right on the spot. Never drank again for the rest of his life. Never drank again. And I hear that and I think, what the hell? I mean, come on, Dad, you got to push through that. And you can get people to help you fill in the blanks. There's ways to push through blackouts, but geez, to quit drinking altogether seems a bit extreme. My mother had one glass of wine on Christmas Eve, and she would not finish it. And that was it. That was the extent of drinking that I had in my home. So I didn't grow up thinking I would drink. I didn't grow up aspiring to. I grew up in with something else, and what was wrong with me was that I have always felt very uncomfortable in my own skin. And so when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous years later, I was convinced because of this that I was not really an alcoholic. My problem was something else. My problem was that I don't feel right in my skin. I feel emotions intensely. I don't get happy, I get ecstatic. I don't get blue, I get suicidal. Um, I have a perception problem, and I don't see the world as it really is. Everything has to filter through my alcoholism. And I go through life uh, sensitive with a perception problem. My feelings get hurt often. And I remember I was meeting a counselor when I was, I don't know, 14 or 15 years old. And I remember telling her that I'm extremely sensitive. And she said, well, Jeff, when people say mean things to you, it's not uncommon that might hurt your feelings. And I had to tell her, I'm like, yeah, but nobody's actually saying anything to me. I just sense that they want to. And that's the kind of head that I'm walking around with is, this imaginary stuff going on and these perception problems. When I talk about a perception problem, what I mean is I have the ability to deduce what people really mean based on their looks and tones of voice, things like that, right? Almost a superpower, except it doesn't serve anyone, at least of all me. And that's who I am. And so I'm going through life. I'm uncomfortable. I compare the way I feel to the way you look. I'm coming up short. Nobody looks as anxious as I am. Nobody looks as guilty as I am. Nobody looks as depressed as I am. And I am just an incomplete individual. At my home group, which meets on Tuesday nights, it's a speaker meeting. We meet in a big room in a church. And on the back of this wall where we meet, they have this mosaic art piece, and it says, "All things made whole." And I've always thought that's so appropriate for the backdrop of an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, because when I got here, I was incomplete. I was an incomplete individual, missing pieces of me that I should not be missing. There's something missing within my life, and as long as it's missing, I will continue to be this neurotic, depressed, anxious, guilty, lost individual. And that's exactly who I was. Now, I share all of this with you, not because that makes me an alcoholic. It makes me neurotic, but it doesn't make me an alcoholic. There has to be one key thing that comes into play, and that is alcohol fixes all of that. See, for me, alcohol wasn't the problem. Alcohol was the solution. And when you talk about in AA, we love to talk about what alcohol does to us, the consequences, the different things that happen. But sometimes we forget to talk about what alcohol does for us. You know, when people come out of the woods and they're asking you things like, "I can't believe you're all lit up again. What were you thinking? What are you doing? Why would you do this?" The honest to God answer is, I am trying to get back to a place where alcohol does something for me, where it fixes all of that, where it alleviates my fear, where it makes me feel like a complete individual. Best example I know, I'm at a party, I'm 17 years old, I'm uncomfortable, I'm looking around, I don't think anyone really wants me there. Then this guy walks into the party, and we'll call him Paul because that was his name. And Paul walks into the party, and he just looks cool, and he's got his hat on backwards, and everybody's excited to see Paul, and they're high-fiving him and stuff. And I'm watching this, and I just hate Paul, right? Because I'm so envious. I'm so jealous of who he is. I'm this insecure weenie in the corner, and Paul is this big man on campus, and I really want to be like him, but I never will be. And then she walks into the party, and she is the girl of my dreams. She is the girl I've been after my whole life, convinced that if I could get her, everything would be different. But I also know that no girl like that is ever going to be interested in a guy like me. And I'm not going to run the risk of humiliation by going up and trying to initiate any kind of conversation with her. I just can't do it. That is the prison that I live in. That is who I am. And then I start drinking. And as I said earlier, alcohol does something for me. And I start drinking, and I become a completely different person. The first thing that happens is I feel like I stand up a little straighter. You know, it's like I have some kind of weird spine problem, and all of a sudden I can stand up a little straighter. And I notice that I can look you in the eye for the first time. And I feel confidence that a guy like me doesn't have. Suddenly I'm looking around this party. I'm glad I came. I'm making this party. Most of these people are chumps who don't know how to have fun. And it's all different for me. And now, armed with this kind of confidence, I'm going to start righting some wrongs. And so the first thing I do is we go find Paul, right? And I let Paul know, "Hey, man, about an hour ago when you got here, there was quite a bit of tension between you and I." Paul doesn't know this. He doesn't know there was some neurotic fool in the corner having an imaginary war, which I've come to find out most of my wars with people are imaginary. The other people don't usually know they're involved in it. And so, but I let Paul know, hey, man, if you're looking for trouble, you found it right here, baby. And I can't tell you how liberating it is to be able to tell someone something like that. I leave him befuddled. He doesn't know what's going on. And I go find her, right? Except now I'm not intimidated. I'm not scared. I'm not worried. I walk up to her with confidence that a guy like me doesn't have. I look her square in the eye. I let her know that I could be with anyone I want at this party, male or female, and I'm picking her. And she doesn't seem to understand what a great honor this is. She doesn't seem to reciprocate any interest back in me. I'm not bothered by that at all. I lock her in a bathroom until she comes to her senses. And that is what alcohol does for me, is it turns me into a person that I've always wanted to be. If you ever drank and you said something to yourself like, man, the real Jeff comes out when I'm drinking. That's what we're talking about. That's what's going on. The real me comes out, right? And for a little while, it feels that way. And for a little while, alcohol is a great equalizer for me. You know, I don't badmouth alcohol because it probably, in my case, prevented a teenage suicide. It allowed me to go places and do things that I would not have been able to do on my own. Now, it became very apparent to me very quickly that I drank differently than my fellows. And I don't seem to have an off switch. And so what happens to me is I go out with good intentions. My intentions are always just to get there, right? And if you're a real alcoholic, you know where there is, right? It's that magical place that alcohol can put people like us. And I go out with the intention of just getting there, but I don't stay there very long. And I end up drinking more than I planned to, and I end up getting drunker than I wanted to get drunk. And I don't know how to stop it. And so off I go, right? I start drinking as much as I can, as often as I can, because it seems to be the only thing that makes me feel okay. It seems to be the only thing that makes me feel normal. And so, as I said, I get drunker than I wanted to get drunk, and pretty soon I'm doing things I don't want to do, saying things I don't want to say, going places I don't want to go, hurting people I don't want to hurt. And I'm convinced, though, that there's a way to get on top of this. You know, the great obsession of every alcoholic, the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking. That's what I'm after, is I want to be able to control and enjoy my drinking. And unfortunately, I cannot do both. There are rare times where I have been able to control my drinking, and I absolutely hate it. I can't fathom why you would want to drink like that. And then conversely, for me to drink in a manner that is comfortable for me and that's fun, is we're not controlling it. I'm a throw the top away kind of guy, and we'll just drink the bottle. And so when you drink like that, you get into a lot of trouble. And I move into a phase where alcohol starts to do things to me, and I just blaze right through it. And so ultimately, what happened for me was I was at a party one night, nothing different, nothing new, insanely drunk. And I always walked around with a lot of hurt inside of me. And on this particular night, I'm extremely spiritually immature. And my attitude is, if I can't feel good, then I want you to hurt as bad as I do. And so on this particular night, I decided that I wanted everyone to hurt as much as I did. And I started just hurling insults at people. And eventually it got to be everyone was on one side of the room, and I was standing over here by myself. And this girl stepped forward and she said, "What's the matter with you?" And that question stopped me in my tracks. And I remember deep down inside of me, where the truth lived, a little voice saying, I didn't say it out loud, but a little voice saying to myself, I don't know. I really don't know. I in no way wanted this to happen. I went out tonight with the best of intentions of just taking the edges off a world that seems too cruel and I don't fit into. And I don't want to be saying the things I'm saying, and I don't want this guy looking at me like this, ready to fight, and I don't want this girl crying because of what I've said. But I honestly don't know. And that was the best answer I had that night. Years later, I would come into Alcoholics Anonymous. I would get a sponsor, and my sponsor would allow me the gift of identification. I think the first real gift you get here is the gift of identification. I think it's the first real gift you have to get. Until I identify with you, I can't be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm different. I'm glad you found AA. I'm glad it works for you. But for me, there's something else wrong with me. And what happened for me was my sponsor took me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the course of doing so, we went through the doctor's opinion at the beginning of the book. And there I finally found what was wrong with me. We're going through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're going through the doctor's opinion. And my sponsor would read, and then he would stop, and he would quiz me, and grill me and stuff. And so we're reading about the doctor's opinion where it talks about phenomenon of craving. And my sponsor would say, now you understand what he's talking about, right? Phenomenon. Now, I don't know how you answer a question that you don't know the answer to, but this is how I do. I'm like, yeah, I know what he's talking about. And my sponsor would say, okay, well, what does he mean? And I'd say, well, you know. And my sponsor would say, yeah, I know. I'm asking you if you know. And so when I was finally pinpointed into a corner, pushed into a corner and had to give an answer, this would be what I would say things like, well, it's a phenomenon like a UFOs or Bigfoot. And my sponsor would roll his eyes at me and he would say, no, we're not talking about UFOs or Bigfoot. He said, we're talking about this indescribable thirst that takes over once you start drinking. This idea that once you start, there's an old proverb that really, in essence, describes my story in a nutshell. And it's the man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the man. And that's my story right there. I take a drink, and then the drink takes a drink. I take a drink, and something starts to cry out for more. A phenomenon beyond my control takes over, and my body, which, by the way, this has all been proven now scientifically. This is not theory. My body reacts differently to alcohol. It breaks it down differently, and something happens where I cry out for more. So my sponsor said, can you understand the idea that you have a physical allergy to alcohol? And I had to have things broken down in simplistic terms. And I remember him describing this idea that I was allergic to alcohol. And I remember thinking, yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. I respond differently to alcohol than it seems like about 92% of the population does. Yes, that makes sense. And so this idea of an allergy, we'd kind of go down this hole and we'd say, okay, imagine if you were allergic to bananas. And every time you ate bananas, you broke out in red hives. How far down the rabbit hole are you going with that? Are you changing brands? Well, the Chiquita bananas don't seem to agree with me, but I'm sure Dole bananas won't harm me at all. Do you keep bananas conveniently hidden around your house so that you always are within 5 feet of a banana? I don't lie to people about where I'm going at night so I can run down to this corner market and buy a bunch of bananas. I don't keep them in my house in case someone comes by. I wouldn't want to be rude and not offer a banana. I don't do any of that. I just quit eating bananas and I move on with my life, right? Far worse things happen to me when I drink alcohol than just breaking out in hives. Why can I not stop? And it moves into the second part of my illness, which is the mental obsession of the mind to drink alcohol. Now, when my sponsor first laid that on me, I remember thinking, I was telling him, I'm like, no, that's not me. I don't think about drinking all the time. That's not what I do. And he's like, that's not what we mean. We're not saying that you do. We're saying that you have a mind that over any given period of time blocks out all of the reasons why you're not supposed to drink for the insane idea that it will be different this time. And that I get. I've lived it 1,000 times. I one time got on this kick where I decided I was going to stop drinking. And I told everyone that I was no longer drinking. Don't offer me alcohol. I'm done. I'm on the wagon for keeps, blah, blah, blah. And we went on this road trip. We went to Minneapolis, and I got in this car, and I'm sitting in the back with this cooler of beer next to me. And the minute we got out of the city limits, I had my hand in that cooler. And my buddy's driving, and he's like, "Hey, man, I thought you quit drinking." And this was my response: "Not on road trips." And that made perfect sense to me. Perfect sense to me. I have this mind that leads me back to drinking. Um, by the way, I don't often share what happened at the end of that story. One leads to 15, of course, for me, because I have no off switch. I have no ability to stop. By the time we got to Minneapolis, I was convinced all of my friends were against me. I was emotional. I was drunk. I was out of it. I ended up having them let me out in the middle of downtown Minneapolis, where some other guy came along. And really, there's no nice way to put it. He ultimately kind of kidnaps me. This guy picks me up, starts taking me around, and will not take me back to my hotel. Anyway, that's where I end up. That's the kind of things that happen to me because I have this mental obsession of the mind to drink alcohol. And once it allows me to take a drink, my body takes over, an allergy takes over that causes me to drink more than I plan to. Now, what I'm describing is the physical sensitivity to alcohol coupled with the mental obsession of the mind to drink. But for me, there's a third component to my illness, which is the spiritual malady. This idea that all of my life I have been disconnected from something that I cannot be disconnected from. I am lacking a power in my life. There is something missing, and I don't know what it is. I just know the effect of it is that I'm always restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm restless in the sense, this is sober. I'm restless in the sense that I am not living the life I want to be living. I'm not with the right person. I'm not at the right job. I don't drive the right car. I mean, whatever it is, I need to make a change. I'm irritable. I'm tired of doing twice as much as everyone else and getting half the results. And I'm discontent in the sense that everything loses its shine for me. Everything loses its shine. And I don't like things when they're not shiny. I love things when they're new. I love relationships for the first 3 months. I love jobs for the first couple of weeks. I love new cars for the first month, whatever it is. But ultimately, it always loses its shine. I remember buying a new car. I'm driving this red car. And about a month later, I pull up to a stoplight, and a guy pulls up to me in the exact same car, only it was black. And you know what I was thinking? I should have got the black one. So I am restless, irritable, and discontent unless I can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. A few drinks that I am not allowed to take. My body will not allow me to do so. But that's the way I live. And so unless I can have a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, a personality change sufficient enough to bring about recovery from alcoholism, cast aside old ideas and outlooks and attitudes for a completely new set. Call it whatever you're comfortable with. But unless I can find a way to tap into this power greater than myself, I am doomed to repeat this cycle and ultimately die from it. And that is what is wrong with me. Now, when I was standing at that party and that girl asked me what was wrong with me, I wasn't armed with all this knowledge. I didn't know. Best answer I had back then was, I don't know. And I just continued doing what I do because I had no way out, which is really what I've been looking for, is a way out. You know, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous at once upon a time was going to be titled The Way Out, because that's what we get here, is a way out. A way out of what? Of a self-imposed prison that we do to ourselves. Because I've come to discover that the prison I live in, all of the locks are on the inside and I hold the keys. I've been waiting for someone to come and break me out, and yet I'm the one that has to do it. I'm the one who has to let myself out. But again, I didn't know any of that, and I just continued on letting alcohol do what it does to me. And I had a lot of little experiences, these little God nudges, what I call, where God's like tapping me on the shoulder saying, "Hey, man, I think you need to stop drinking." And I'm just oblivious to it. I just continue doing what I do. I've been in a high-speed chase with the highway patrol. I've been arrested in Mexico. I've committed or attempted suicide twice. One of my suicide attempts, by this time now, I was in college. Um, I was at a party, nothing new. There was a her there. Again, nothing new. I went over to her, and as I was stumbling over in her direction, I remember this voice inside of me was like, tell this girl the truth. Don't lie. Tell this girl the truth. And so I just started telling her my story, the long, unedited version. And, telling her how I think about suicide all the time. But now that I met her, I'm not going to do that. Told her I'd been following her, which I had been. She didn't seem to find that romantic. Um, Ultimately, she said to me, you scare me and I want you to leave. And I was devastated, right? I went home and I decided to kill myself. I took a handful of sleeping pills and waited to die. And some friends came back and wanted to know what had happened. And so I told them, and my buddy said, he said, listen, man, you need to get to a hospital so you can meet with a priest. Otherwise, your soul can't be admitted to heaven. And I was so drunk that made sense. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, man. We got to go. And so I went to the hospital, and a nurse met us there. And she came out and she wanted to know what I took. And I remember I had the bottle, and I held up the bottle, and I took these. She grabbed the bottle from me, and she started laughing. And I remember, drunk as I was, I remember thinking, this is unprofessional. This is just nothing funny about this at all. Until she held up the bottle and she pointed at it and she's like, Jeff, what you took were vitamin C tablets. And so I'm still here today, by some miracle. And so I botched the suicide. I told you I'm a guy who doesn't measure up. I don't even measure up when I'm in the psych ward, because I ended up going into the psych ward for that. And I remember meeting people in there and, talking to them. And they're like, what are you in for? And the guy's like, I have the ability to control fish. Yeah, solid. You belong here. How about you? I OD'd on vitamin C. I mean, it's a really weenie way to end up in the psych ward. But I've had all of these things happen. I've gone to treatment several times, always trying to find a way out, trying to find a solution to a problem that I don't really understand. I'd gone to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 19 years old. I went to AA. It wasn't for me. I didn't identify. I judged the way everything you said. People came to me, well-meaning people came to me wanting to help, but I had the wagon so tightly circled around myself that nobody understood me. Nobody understood. You're a female, you don't get me. You're wearing a hat, you don't get me. Whatever the case may be, I judged my way out of Alcoholics Anonymous, decided to try and quit drinking on my own, which I cannot do. I lack the power. For the next 2 years, I tried to quit drinking on my own. It didn't work. I tried a lot of different things. One of my favorites is I got a tattoo once upon a time. And what I did was I got Wile E. Coyote from the Roadrunner cartoons. And I decided that, because Wile E. Coyote was always falling off cliffs and anvils were landing on his head, and I just identified. And so I got Wile E. Coyote, and then in my real stroke of genius, I had the eyes bloodshot. And the plan was, if I was ever going to be tempted by alcohol again, I would just need to look at this tattoo to be reminded of the horrors that alcohol inflicts upon me. It's not a bad plan. The only problem is I put the tattoo on my back. So it's not really going to serve me very well when I can't see it. So anyway, I've had all of these things happen. And in March of 1992, I had bombed out of school. I did not have a friendly direction to go. I was meeting a psychiatrist, a therapist, and an alcohol counselor. And all three of them wanted me to go to treatment. And so eventually, begrudgingly, I agreed to. I went to a treatment facility. And in that treatment facility, they would pour us into a van and they would take us to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And slowly but surely, by going to meetings, I did something that was invaluable to a guy like me. I listened. For the first time, and I listened. They used to say, I don't know if they still do, I haven't heard it in a while, but they used to say, take the cotton out of your mouth, or take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. And great advice. And that's really what I needed to do. And the more I listened, the more I started to identify with you. The more I first of all identified with the way that you drank. Then I started to identify with the way that you felt. Then I started to identify with the way that you reacted to life. And eventually the day came where I was able to concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. I had taken the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason it's so important, in my opinion, the reason it's so important to get the gift of identification is because then that quickly moves you to the second gift AA gives you, which is hope. The idea that, maybe I'm like you, maybe I have what you have. And then the real light bulb moment comes on where I think, maybe if I do what you do, I could recover from alcoholism too. And that's what happened. Is I looked around one day and I decided that I think I'm just like you, except you seem happy. You seem to have purpose and direction in your life. You seem to enjoy being sober. I want those things. And when I looked around, the common denominators amongst people who seem to be enjoying their recovery were sponsorship, home group, a basic working knowledge of the steps and understanding of the 12 traditions, some kind of a relationship with a power greater than themselves. And that's what I decided to go after. And as I told you earlier, the first step for me was getting a sponsor. And so I got this sponsor, and we went through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my sponsor created an environment of recovery, not of my making. And thank God for that, because if it was up to me, I would have chosen all comfort. I would have only done what I wanted to do. And my sponsor didn't give me that option. He was always pushing me to do more. First thing he wanted me to do was join his home group. Second thing he wanted me to do was get a commitment in his home group. My first commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a greeter. And I was a horrible greeter, let me assure you, because I don't have a good poker face. And I'm standing at the door and I'm not happy to be there and I'm not hiding it. And people are coming in and I'm welcoming them. Hey, welcome to AA. It sucks we can't drink, but here we are. There's coffee. And that's me greeting in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? But I'm taking the right action. I'm doing the right things. And that's what's become key for me. Alcoholics Anonymous is a program that cares about what you do, not about what you think. And this is a program where we act our way into better living. We don't live our way into better thinking. And I took the right actions. My sponsor would trick me. He would say things to me like, hey, we're speaking at the hospital on Saturday night. Can you come? And I'm like, yeah, sure. He's like, well, we're meeting at my house at 5:00. Now, that seemed kind of early because the meeting was at 8:00. But I just assumed we were going to greet for 3 hours like idiots. So I would show up at the house, we'd get in the car, we'd take off supposedly to the hospital. The next thing I know, we're going out of town. And I remember I'd ask my sponsor, I'm like, I thought we were speaking at the hospital. And he's like, yeah, we are, but it's in Bismarck, 100 miles away. And I'm stuck in the back of the seat, back middle hump of this car. And not happy about it. And I'm thinking to myself, this couldn't possibly get worse. I was wrong. Chris is sitting up front. And Chris is like, hey, everybody, I've made up a game we can play on the road. And he pulls out a copy of As Bill Sees It. And he's like, I'm going to read from As Bill Sees It. And then you can guess what it's from. Is it from the big book, 12 and 12, a letter Bill wrote? Who knows, man? And I'm in the back seat and I'm thinking to myself, absolutely not. This is where I draw the line. This is where my integrity finally steps in. And no, I am not doing the Saturday night, stuck in this car, back middle hump, playing the what the hell did Bill write this in game. I refuse. Pull this car over, drop me off in the ditch, and let me go home because I refuse to do this. Now, you'll notice there's something very important I said in that sentence, is that that's what I thought. That's not what I said. By this time, I had learned to act better than I feel. And so I didn't say any of that negative crap that was going through my head. Instead, I just guessed grapevine every time and took second place. And I remember my sponsor at one point, he's like, yeah, you know a lot about the grapevine, Jeff. You're damn right I do. What do you do in your off time? And, you know, I took the right actions. We went to the hospital and we spoke and we tried to carry a message of hope. And I did a lot of things that I didn't believe in. I did a lot of things that I didn't think would work. And yet slowly but surely it did. I got to be 2 years sober. I ended up meeting a girl who had what I've been looking for my whole life, which was an interest in me. I find that to be a very attractive quality. And we started dating, and eventually we got married. We started having babies. And all of this is happening to me. You know, I'm a guy who I was told once upon a time that would need to be heavily medicated to function in society. And here I am living this life because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've got a little son who was born. His middle name is Wilson, after Bill Wilson. 17 months later, we had a daughter. My wife, who doesn't understand the importance of AA, vetoed the name Abigail Dr. Bob. And but we have this family, and I'm cruising along. I'm meeting with my sponsor. I'm doing to the best of my ability the work in the 12 steps. By this time now, I'm trying to carry a message to other people, because one of the things I've discovered about myself is that the root of my problem is not drinking. The root of my problem is selfishness and self-centeredness. And my sponsor used to say, if you're only working the first 11 steps, you're still a self-seeker. I have got to, at some point, engage in the 12th step work. That doesn't mean I have to be sponsoring people, but I have to be doing something to try and serve my fellow man where I am carrying a message. And so I started shaking hands. I started offering rides. I started offering people to come sit by me at the meeting, whatever the case may be. And I stayed here, and I stayed sober, and I've grown up here, and I've matured here, and it's been a great ride. And it's been one that I'm thrilled to be on. But life happens and things happen. And just to share a couple of stories with you and things that have happened to me over the last 32 years. 4 years ago, I turned 50 years old. And when you turn 50, the rules of life are that you're supposed to go in and have colonoscopy. And so I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, I didn't want to, of course, but I set the appointment up. I went in. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and a male nurse comes out. And it's a guy I sponsor. It's a guy that I sponsored. I've sponsored him for the last 15 years. And he comes out and he's like, hey, you're not going to believe this. I'm your nurse. And why that's cool is because he had lost his nursing license once upon a time for being too liberal with the samples. And now I'd sponsored him through all the work of getting his license back. And now he's a bona fide nurse, and he's going to be my nurse, which is kind of cool. And we go into this procedure, and the procedure does not go well. And we start hearing words like biopsy and cancer and surgery and all the things you don't want to hear during a procedure like this. And for the next few months, my sponsee, who I had walked with as he got his license back and helped him, my sponsee now walked with me and helped me as I went through this really uncertain and very scary time. And I had my own personal ask a nurse. We researched the surgeons together. He would tell me everything. He would read my chart for me because, of course, I don't know how to read that stuff. And he literally walked me through it because alcoholics have been there with me throughout my entire life. Members of Alcoholics Anonymous have been with me my entire life as I've gone through the ups and the downs that come along with being sober. Now, why I bring this story up, though, is a couple of reasons. One, just to show you, you get what you give in AA. I'd sponsored this guy. I'd helped him once upon a time, and now turnabout was fair play. And now he was able to help me. And he was able to walk me through something that was extremely scary. And but that first appointment, when we found out the news, that night, I'm getting ready. And I'm getting ready for bed, and my wife's looking at me, and all of a sudden she's like, "Oh my God!" She's like, "I think you better go look in the mirror." And I'm like, "Now what?" So I go and I look in the mirror. My sponsee during this procedure, while I was out or under, um, he has written his name in a heart on my ass, and that's the kind of people that God puts in my life, right? Those are the kind of people that my God sends to me to be helpful. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I really wouldn't. 3 years ago, I was cruising along in life. Everything's going okay. Oh, by the way, I never tell the end of the story. Um, Not that it's relevant to an AA talk, but they did go in and do surgery and took out all the icky. And I just actually 2 weeks ago had a screen and was completely clear of cancer. So I'm happy to report that. 3 years ago, I'm cruising along. Everything's going fine. My daughter calls me up, my little Abigail, Dr. Bob, and she calls me up one night and she said, "Dad, look, when I start drinking, I can't stop. And when I try and stop, I can't stay stopped." And we know what that means. We know, we've lived it. And now it's alcoholism's back on my front step. And it's attacking one of my kids. So she came over and we packed her up in the car, and I took her to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and talked to her a little bit about what you do here and how you stay here and all that stuff. One of the things I suggested to her was that she get a sponsor, and she knew a girl there. And so we got to the meeting, and she walked up to this little girl and asked her to sponsor her. And I walked up shortly thereafter to the newly appointed sponsor and said, "What can I do to help?" And she said, "You can stay out of mine in God's way." And I remember thinking to myself, are you out of your mind? This is my baby we're talking about. I'm not staying out of your way. I'm an impactful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I do a lot. I sponsor a lot of people. I've spoken places. I've started meetings. I can help, is what I was thinking. But as we've learned, this is not a program of thought. This is a program of action. And my action, what I said, none of the things I was thinking. What I said was, "You're absolutely right. I will stay out of your way." And that's what I did. I had to do one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, which was step back and allow the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous to take my baby. And that's exactly what you did. And I sat back and I watched you do the same things for her that you once upon a time had done for me. I watched people tell her, "Just get in the car. Come on, we're going." I watched people encourage her to get a commitment in her home group. I watched her sponsor take her through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I watched the fellowship of AA introduce the program of AA to my daughter. And it was a beautiful thing to watch and witness. And that little girl is about to celebrate 3 years of sobriety, which is really, really cool. And I'm immensely grateful. In fact, she came to me 2 nights ago, last night. She came to me and she said, "Hey, I took a commitment at the state hospital. I'm speaking there. Why, there's an open slot. Why don't you take it with me?" So she's now pushing me to get active and to do more, which is really cool. So her and I are going to go do the state hospital together. Years ago, I was on this kick. They talk about being happy, joyous, and free in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember one day sitting there thinking, I understand what freedom is. Freedom from the bondage of self, freedom from the mental obsession to drink alcohol. I'm pretty confident I get that. But I didn't understand the difference between happiness and joy. And I started asking around, and I remember nobody seemed to know. People would say things to me like, "Well, you'll know it when you see it." Not helpful at all. But nonetheless, they were right. I knew it when I saw it. Years ago, my son was about 15 years old, and he wanted this laptop. And we told him we couldn't get it. We couldn't afford it. But of course, we had gotten the laptop, and we wrapped it in an oversized box to throw him off the trail and all this stuff. And when the day came, or that night came when we were opening gifts, It's the last gift that we opened. Um, I remember the moment when he opened the package, the present, and the look on his face when the realization came over him that he had gotten the laptop was pure happiness, just pure happiness in this kid's face. And then I looked over at his mother watching him, and the look on her face was pure joy. We get to have both here. We get to be happy. Sometimes things go your way. Sometimes every light is green. Sometimes the boss calls you in to tell you good job. Sometimes the person that you love loves you back. We get to be happy here. We get to have a lot of cool things happen. But we also get to experience joy. This idea uh, of being genuinely happy for others. You know, as I mentioned, I've worked with a lot of guys in AA, and I've gotten a front row view into Alcoholics Anonymous and what it can do. And it's been amazing how often I'm happy for them when I'm not benefiting. I wouldn't have known to ask for that. You know, they used to say if I made a list when I got here of everything I wanted, I would have sold myself short. And I used to think, I don't know about that. I mean, I put together a pretty extensive list, but I would not have known to put joy down. I wouldn't have known. I didn't know that was something that I could even aspire to be. And that's exactly what's happened. I've watched families get put back together. I've watched people who were lost find purpose. I've watched people who were hopeless find hope. And I've gotten the joy of experiencing that through watching the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's been just that. It's been a real joy to be a member. So I think I'm going to cut this just a little short. I'm getting a little winded here, but again, I want to thank you guys for having me at the Lunch Bunch, and I want to wish you a happy New Year. As I said at the beginning of my talk, every night for us becomes New Year's Eve. If there's something objectionable going on in your life, change it. We don't have to wait for a holiday to make those kind of decisions. We live in a program with a power, armed now with a power much, much greater than ourselves, that allows miraculous change to happen on a daily basis. And if you look around, you'll see it. And it's a wonderful privilege to be able to see it. So thank you so much for having me. God bless.